You train hard, you show up, you push sets close to failure, yet your body stays almost the same. And the real problem is not your discipline, but a silent deficit in energy availability. When total calorie intake is too low, the body enters a conservation mode where performance, recovery, and muscle growth are deprioritized. The mechanism is straightforward. Muscle protein synthesis is an energy-dependent process, and when energy intake drops below what is required, the body reduces anabolic signaling and increases fatigue signals. This is described clearly in the International Olympic Committee consensus on relative energy deficiency in sport, where they state, though energy availability impairs metabolic, physiological, and performance function, the consequence is subtle but powerful. Your training sessions feel harder, your strength plateaus, and even when you consume protein, your body cannot fully use it to build tissue. Over weeks and months, this creates the illusion that your genetics are average or your program is flawed, when in reality, your system lacks fuel. The solution is not random overeating, it is controlled adequacy. Most lifters aiming for growth need a small but consistent surplus, often around 250 to 500 kilocalories above maintenance, depending on body size and training load. This ensures that each session has enough substrate to drive adaptation. One useful analogy: building muscle without enough calories is like trying to build a house with limited bricks. The plan may be perfect, but construction slows or stops. If your body weight has not increased by at least 0.25 to 0.5% per week during a gaining phase, your intake is likely insufficient. Before blaming your program, audit your energy intake for 7 consecutive days and compare it to your weight trend. That single check often reveals the real bottleneck. Most people think they eat enough protein because they include it in meals. But the real issue is not presence, it is dose and distribution. And that is where progress quietly breaks down. Muscle growth depends on repeated stimulation of muscle protein synthesis, and this process has a threshold. If a meal does not contain enough high-quality protein, the signal is weak or absent. The mechanism centers on essential amino acids, particularly leucine, which acts as a trigger. Research summarized by the International Society of Sports Nutrition shows that total daily protein intake around 1.4 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight supports hypertrophy. But equally important, each meal should typically provide around 20 to 40 grams of high-quality protein to maximally stimulate this process. As they state, protein ingestion stimulates muscle protein synthesis in a dose-dependent manner. The consequence of missing this threshold is not dramatic in a single day, but over weeks it becomes decisive. You might train consistently, yet only trigger optimal growth once or twice per day, instead of 3 or 4 times. That is a lost opportunity cycle repeated dozens of times per month. The solution is structured intake, not obsession. Divide your daily protein into 3 to 5 feedings, each hitting the effective dose relative to your body size. For example, a 70-kilogram lifter aiming for 120 grams per day can structure 4 meals of about 30 grams. This ensures repeated anabolic signaling across the day. One clean analogy: think of protein as a switch, not a dimmer. If you never press hard enough, the light does not fully turn on. Start by auditing your last 3 days of eating, not just total protein, but protein per meal, and you will often find the missing stimulus. You can have sufficient calories and even decent protein, but if your carbohydrate intake is too low, your training output becomes the limiting factor, and that reduces the entire growth signal. The problem is not visible at rest. It shows up inside the session. Carbohydrates are the primary source for muscle glycogen, which fuels repeated high-intensity contractions. When glycogen is low, force production drops earlier, fatigue rises faster, and your ability to sustain volume declines. The mechanism is well described in position stands from the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which state that carbohydrate availability directly influences training capacity and recovery. They note, carbohydrate ingestion can enhance performance and recovery, particularly during high-intensity exercise. The consequence is subtle but destructive. Your first sets feel acceptable, but later sets lose quality. Reps decrease, load drops, and effort shifts from mechanical tension to survival. Over time, this means fewer effective reps per session, which translates to less hypertrophy stimulus across weeks. Many lifters misinterpret this as poor conditioning or lack of mental toughness, when it is actually a fuel limitation. The solution is targeted carbohydrate intake, not random high-carb eating. Most resistance-trained individuals benefit from around 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight, adjusted for training volume. More importantly, timing matters around sessions. Consuming 30 to 60 grams of easily digestible carbohydrates 1 to 2 hours before training can improve session quality. One analogy: glycogen is like battery charge, and each set drains it. If you start half full, you shut down early. Track your training performance alongside your carbohydrate intake for 1 week, and you will see the relationship clearly. You can correct calories, protein, and carbohydrates, yet still feel flat, fatigued, and inconsistent. And this is where micronutrient deficiencies quietly limit progress. The problem is not dramatic. It accumulates over time and mimics poor genetics. The mechanism involves multiple systems. Iron supports oxygen transport through hemoglobin. Vitamin D influences muscle function and neuromuscular efficiency. And magnesium plays a role in muscle contraction and energy metabolism. When any of these are insufficient, performance capacity declines even if macronutrients are correct. Reviews in journals such as Nutrients report that suboptimal vitamin D status is associated with reduced muscle strength and function, and that magnesium contributes to muscle performance and recovery processes. The consequence is a pattern most lifters recognize but rarely explain. Workouts feel heavier than they should. Endurance inside sets drops. Recovery between sessions slows, and progress becomes inconsistent. Over months, this leads to fewer productive sessions and a lower cumulative training stimulus. The most frustrating part is that standard diets that look clean can still be low in key micronutrients, especially if food variety is limited or sun exposure is low. The solution is targeted awareness, not blind supplementation. First, expand dietary variety with iron-rich foods like red meat or legumes, magnesium sources such as nuts and whole grains, and ensure some exposure to sunlight or dietary vitamin D sources. Second, if symptoms like persistent fatigue, poor recovery, or low performance persist, consider basic blood work, including ferritin, for iron status and serum vitamin D. One analogy: micronutrients act like small gears in a large machine. Each one seems minor, but if a few are missing, the system loses efficiency. Audit food variety over the past week, not just quantity, and you will often find the hidden gap. You might now be eating enough calories, hitting protein targets, and fueling training with carbohydrates, yet progress still feels inconsistent. And the issue shifts from what you eat to how you distribute it across the day. The problem is not total intake. It is missed timing opportunities that reduce the frequency of effective recovery signals. The mechanism is tied to how muscle protein synthesis behaves over time. After a sufficient protein feeding, synthesis rises, peaks, then returns toward baseline within a few hours. If long gaps follow, the system stays inactive instead of being re-stimulated. Guidance from the International Society of Sports Nutrition emphasizes that while total daily protein is primary, distributing intake evenly across the day helps maintain repeated stimulation. They note that spacing protein feedings every 3 to 4 hours is a practical strategy to support hypertrophy. The consequence of poor distribution is not obvious in a single day, but it compounds. Skipping protein earlier, eating a small post-workout meal, then consuming most calories late at night creates long, inactive windows where recovery could have been supported. Over weeks, this reduces the number of effective growth cycles your body experiences. Many lifters believe they are doing everything right because their daily totals look correct, but their structure is inefficient. The solution is simple and controlled. Divide your intake into 3 to 5 structured meals, each containing sufficient protein, and place one of those meals within a few hours after training. Carbohydrates should also be present around the session to support glycogen restoration. One analogy: think of recovery like charging a device multiple times instead of once at the end of the day. Shorter, consistent charges maintain function better than one large refill. Start by mapping your current meal timing over a typical day, then adjust spacing to avoid long gaps without protein. At this point, the pattern becomes clear. The body was not resisting growth. It was consistently undersupplied. And the final step is turning that awareness into a repeatable system. The problem most lifters face now is inconsistency. They fix one variable for a few days, then drift back into old habits, and progress stalls again. The mechanism is cumulative adaptation. Muscle growth is not triggered by isolated perfect days. It is the result of repeated adequate inputs across weeks. When calories, protein, carbohydrates, and micronutrients fluctuate too much, the body cannot maintain a stable environment for adaptation. Position stands from the International Society of Sports Nutrition consistently emphasize that. Long-term consistency in energy and nutrient intake is a primary driver of hypertrophy outcomes. The consequence of inconsistency is deceptive. You may have several strong sessions, followed by underfueled days that erase part of the progress signal. Strength gains slow, body composition changes stall, and motivation drops because effort no longer matches results. Over months, this creates the impression of being stuck, when, in reality, the inputs are simply unstable. The solution is not perfection. It is control through tracking and feedback. Start with a 7-day audit. Record body weight each morning. Track total calories, protein intake, and pre-training carbohydrates. Keep food choices simple to reduce variability. After 1 week, evaluate trends. If body weight is not increasing during a gaining phase, increase calories slightly. If performance drops, review carbohydrate timing. If fatigue persists, revisit micronutrient intake or consider basic blood work. One direct quote summarizes the principle. Consistency over time is the key determinant of training adaptation, a concept repeated across sports nutrition literature. The actionable step is precise. For the next 7 days, track intake and body weight without changing anything else. That single data set will reveal whether your limitation is training or nutrition, and in most cases, it is nutrition.